Appalachia, and it's still rooted in those in the stereotypes of poverty, of the problems of resource extraction economies, and a lot of this was shaped by the notion that came with modernization theory that somehow there was something wrong with the people in this region, that they couldn't overcome the problems. That much of it focused, and as a result, the people of this region react against that. There's this wonderful film done by Appalachia called "Stranger with a Camera," and it's about a Canadian who comes with a film crew and who really wants to try and understand the people of the region. This is 1967.
Yeah.
I think 1967, and so he brings a film crew, and he's filming a coal miner just gotten off at the end of the day, sitting on a porch of a rented shack, and the owner of that shack comes and starts screaming at him to turn off the camera, and eventually shoots him, kills him, and part of that, it sort of gets at that difficulty of people coming in from the outside with images of who we are as people, those of us that live in Appalachia, who we are, what we need, and the flip side of that, people in this region knowing a good deal more about what Mike just said about the positives and the negatives and the range of experience in this region, and being defensive about that image that gets projected. So for historians, that the fact that image was and in some ways it peaks during the war on poverty. It's that it essentializes a certain part of the region, and that still today continues to affect the way national media see the region. So this photo project seems to me a great first step in sort of trying to get out there that this region is very complex, very different than Eastern Kentucky and Southern West Virginia.
So we'll let you guys open up to questions or comments from you guys that you want to ask the panelists, or just thoughts that anybody has on what has been said. I know people want to talk. You can raise your hand or just like start talking.
I think we've answered all the questions.
All right, Ken. I have a question for you. So do we know if the deepest, darkest, most poverty-stricken places in 1967 war on poverty, are they still the deepest, darkest poverty places right now? Has anything changed in terms of alleviation of poverty?
Unfortunately, no.
I mean, that's what my guess is that absolutely not. Those
Unfortunately,
places.
that's the case. And despite the fact that the coal industry does offer some high-paying jobs, or has at various points offered high-paying jobs, certainly from the 80s forward. And again, I'm not, I can't say for certain that it goes to the war on poverty, but my guess is it does. That those areas are still the parts of the region that are most at risk in terms of economics.
Can I add in here too? In public health, we teach that health and socioeconomic status go hand in hand.
Sure.
That one is a predictor of the other. So if you want to look for the least healthy place in the United States, what county ranks at the bottom with the shortest lifespan, with all of the indicators for health at the bottom? I have a colleague from Oklahoma who got in a debate with me as to what county that would be, and she was mentioning all the counties where there are Indian reservations, Native American reservations. And she said, I'm sure they're right at the bottom. And I said, no, I've seen the rankings. Number one ranking, McDowell County, West Virginia. shortest lifespan, least healthy, and some of the highest poverty. The Wall Street Journal just ranked like the worst places to live from the standpoint of economy and health and all. And McDowell managed to make it #1 on their list as well. And so my particular concerns are health, but that health is going right along with economy. And so where we see the worst economies, we see the worst health. However, one of the interesting things about McDowell, again, it's one of these light and dark stories. McDowell used to be one of the richest counties because it had some of the best coal in the world, at least in the nation, and almost certainly in the world. And when it did, it was a prosperous area.
My grandfather told me one time that it was the only other place outside of New York City that you could get Chanel #5.
Yeah, I've heard that story.
Yeah, and then if you look at it though, I mean, just to add on to that, the flip side is think about all of the billions of dollars that have been extracted out of McDowell County that have gone on to make a number of other folks incredibly wealthy and have access to health care and all sorts of things that, you know, prolong life and that sort of thing. And yet when the national media wants to do a story in Trump country, McDowell is the first place that they want to go. And they always want to photograph Ed Shepard at the 76 station.
Yeah, I'm actually working with a couple of classes, and essentially what we're trying to do, we're trying to change the perception that people have of West Virginia, and really do that in a way where we can bring business to Appalachia, and especially the southern parts of West Virginia. What do you think that we can do as photojournalists and just media in general to kind of change that perception and change the whole entire branding of Appalachia?
I think a project like this is a good model for them to look at. Social media was really the platform to spread this project, and I think no one has to wait for the national media to define this place anymore, because we have all these other channels that you can use. So I would look to this project as a model for changing the brand. Sounds like a worthwhile effort that those classes that you're in.
Actually, I'll toot journalism for them because I worked with them. I worked with some of the journalism students, and we went to Southern West Virginia and did a healthy lifestyles project. And it was the journalism students who kind of thought up the approach. What we have to do to change lifestyles, change culture. Culture is not an easy thing to change. We define culture as belief. So think of religion, think of politics, the two things that'll get you into a fight fastest, right? That's because those are beliefs at the core. And so culture is the other thing that's not mentioned with those two. But culture is the other thing that'll get you into a fight. How do you change that without getting punched in the face? Well, the way the journalism students decided to do it, and in fact, some of them were, in fact, from Wyoming and Mingo and Logan and McDowell. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to make healthy lifestyles a competitive activity on the high schools. And the high schools were natural hotbeds for it because they had rivalries already established. And as soon as they said, your rival high school will have a healthier lifestyle than you will, the answer was, oh, no, they won't. And now the idea is change the way that people are thinking. And someone coming from the outside can perceive that because they perceive the way people are thinking right now when they come to these counties. And so they go back to the 76 station and they go back to the same person every time because they know what to expect from that person. We've got to give them something else to expect. We give them something else to expect. We've got to change some things. We've got to let them change. And we're not coming in saying you have to make this change. Never work. You wouldn't want it done to you,
right?
And nobody wants it done to them. But if you say, here's something you can do. If you want to do it, do it. Your neighbors are doing it, by the way.
I also think it's important to look at the notion of othering and how we've been othered for so long, that if we can portray the common threads of humanity in southern West Virginia, in the poorer parts of the state, and really sort of talk about and focus on the fact that, folks in Mingo want the same thing that, folks in Kanawha County and Randolph and other counties want. They want clean water. They want safe and good schools. They want good roads. They want jobs and those sorts of things. I think often outside of here, and even inside of here, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. There's an idea that, they don't want to work. It's easier to stay on welfare. It's easier to collect a check than go to work. But, nearly everybody that I know and talk to, they want to work. And they just don't want to work for an industry that, as was mentioned earlier, is so boom and bust. And, or they do want to work, but it's just so, it's so boom and bust that they can't rely on it. So how do we break away from that mono economy of coal and the hold that it's had on the region for so long, and diversify? But I think finding the humanity and really trying to highlight the fact that we're all the same. We all have the same wants and desires, and not let our identity be defined by folks outside of the region.
As a historian, the most effective projects developed in the war on poverty were projects that came out of listening to the community itself. What do you want? What can help you? What do you need? And how do we go about getting it? So rather than, and I think Mike is right, you don't want to go in and tell them this is your way forward. You want to listen to them. What do they want help with? And to what extent can you provide that help?
To that end, there's an organization called Create West Virginia, and it's kind of what they do. They go around and listen to communities, and there's been a lot of development in small areas. Our communities building up and new businesses. Exciting project.
Yeah, there are multiple projects like that. The West Virginia Community Development Hub is another group doing really great work like that. Try This West Virginia is connected with, I think, both of those organizations, working to empower people in local communities to do what fits for their community, rather than saying we need to make people healthy across the state. They say what will work to help make people in your community healthy, and how can you do that on your own with people who are already in your community. I think that's really important. And then that, like you said, Roger, it helps to humanize folks, right? They have a voice in the things that are happening in their communities and are happening to them, and we can see that people do want good things for themselves. You have a question?
Is there like a modern poverty that should be shown, such as rampant drug abuse?
Yeah.
Sure.
Wyoming County,
Yeah.
Which is one of the southern counties. There's 6 southern counties that probably rank down the bottom, and Wyoming is one of them. Wyoming is the center for opioid abuse in the eastern United States. There are more prescriptions written for opioids in Wyoming County than there are in the rest of the state. And there are only 20,000 people in Wyoming County.
Yeah.
I have my own picture from Wyoming County. It's a picture of 60 crosses sitting in a field. That was the number of drug deaths in the first half of 2013. It fills up the field.
Yeah, one of the pictures that I chose was this one of a pharmacy, and again, I mean, what struck me is there's and I assume that this was a crowdsourced photo, but this picture of this nice little pharmacy in a region that is suffering from this drug epidemic. And why I also picked it is because it to me it speaks to those structural problems that we face. So they know that they're sending prescription drugs down to Wyoming County in numbers that make no sense for the population. And the people that they prosecute are pharmacy owners, small businessmen, not the big pharmaceutical companies who send these things down in numbers that are 100 times what a county like that should be getting in terms of prescription drugs. So yes, I think that there are things like that that really need to be focused on, but it also needs to be put in the context of this isn't a population that is inherently sort of lazy and drug abusers and so on and so forth. This is a conscious decision on the part of pharmaceutical companies to flood an area with drugs.
I just want to point out real quick though, just so that the image is contextualized. This is in Georgia, and this is a small town in Georgia, and I think that the intent of this image, at least the way that I read it, was that it was not a big box grocery store; it was still a community type. But I think it's also important to focus on key issues like prescription drug abuse, and ignoring it certainly isn't going to help, but also not exploring why it's happening in the first place doesn't help either. So if the focus is only on the addiction and how horrible that is and how overwhelming and out of control that can feel, and we don't ever really root out the why, then we do a disservice not only to the people that we're photographing or that we're interviewing, but to everybody else who's paying attention to that subject. And so we owe, there's a responsibility that comes with sort of getting back to the why this exists in the first place.
Yeah, let me add on to that because I've done a lot of work in Wyoming County. I've worked with the circuit judge, circuit clerk, prosecuting attorney down there. The circuit clerk happens to have been a high school football coach. And so a lot of the people he sees coming through his court, he saw coming through the classroom. These are not strangers coming through there. These are people he knows, people he describes as good people. But the drug epidemic brought with it the opportunity for making a living, where nothing else was making a living. And what has happened, particularly in Wyoming County, is you have this bimodal age distribution. There are the very old and the very young. Everybody in between has basically been sent to prison. They are grandparents raising the children right now. That's their description of what's going on. Not my take on it. And so this drug epidemic does more than just take people and put them in addiction and kill some. It takes people and destroys the family. And once you destroy the family structure, again, you're back to poverty.
I think it's important too how you frame these things. So, for example, this is like one of the biggest issues facing the state right now, and certainly I've been working on a series of stories about the explosion in foster care because of it. But the stories that I wrote about, the thousands of kids flooding foster care were not nearly as exciting to people as the one about the church whose ministry was to take in foster children. And I think that's largely because people change more because of possibilities than because of problems. And I feel like, so you do have to tell the story, but I feel like if you will also offer people and here's what people are doing that is working, that people are inspired by that and they can make big inroads.
Humanize the story more too.
And it becomes great.
Yeah, and people like that. Yeah.
And that speaks to what you said, Roger, too. They need to talk about all of the different parts of the story, not just the middle where the culture is breaking down because families are being disrupted and people are dying. I think that's really important and shows all of the different aspects and help us to humanize people as well. One more question on this?
Sure. Mr. May, you spoke of othering, and a lot of you all have touched on the fact that West Virginia, in particular, and Central Appalachia and Appalachia in general, are portrayed in relatively negative lights in external, national, international media. And it seems like the majority, don't let me put words in your mouth, of you focus on creating good media from within these areas and that as a strategy. I'm wondering what you see as combating bad media or media that you believe is portraying these negative images in an unfair, perhaps, light or overly focused light, and combating them on that larger scale, calling out either media outlets for using or misusing images in particular, or if you just think that the best strategy is to work from within and to create better media within here.
Well, I sort of the impetus for me getting involved in the issue of Appalachian representation was about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer now. CNN ran this photo essay on the work of Stacey Kranitz, who I take issue with some of her work in and of itself, but I felt like they did her a huge disservice by the way that they edited her images. So she submitted about 24 or 25 photographs to them to do this photo essay. And what they did was, whoever the editor was, they front-loaded this picture package with, the first picture was of a Klansman, the second picture was of a serpent handler, third picture was of a stripper, the fourth picture was, it was like, oh, I see what you're doing here, you know, like, and so by then people were just clicking, right? Like, what's next, you know, and so I just called them out, and I went after CNN, and I wrote this 3-page blog series, and I never got a response from CNN, but I kicked up enough dust that people were like, oh yeah, why was that loaded? Why were those images stacked the way that they were? And then so the next time that something like that happened, somebody would email me and say, have you seen this? And so I don't have any problem at all picking up the phone or sending an email or sending a tweet or whatever the case may be. And I'll be the first to admit that I have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction sometimes. And even if the picture is or the story is fair, I'm hyper protective of the region, and that may not, you know, be the best approach, but creating conversation, having a space for conversation, a healthy dialogue, whether it starts out as, you know, piss and vinegar and hellfire and brimstone, and it circles back around to a more even-toned conversation, but really calling people out. Or, you know, I wrote a thing when Vice came and did 2 days in Appalachia, and went nuts on that. I lost my mind for like a couple of days on how insane that was. But you also have to keep your hand on the plow and do the work of, you know, showing what you know Appalachia to be, and not allowing anyone else to control the absolute narrative of a place, especially me, because there's no way I can truly represent a place. None of us can, you know, even on our best days could we do that. It takes a collective effort, it takes many voices, and it takes many efforts. But I think it's a combination of those things, is taking those organizations to task, and then also feeling a very personal responsibility to stay engaged in the conversation.